Welcome back to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host, Adam Bird. Folks, I got a hot one lined up for you today. I was introduced to this gentleman by a mutual friend of ours here recently. I've had a couple of different conversations offline with him, and just a true model American community hero. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran. Today, he is a clinical psychologist. My new friend, Dr. Carlos. Doc, how you doing?
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on, man. Looking forward to a wonderful conversation today.
I love it.
Okay.
Listen, let's dive right into this. Tell the listeners, just give us a brief background of who you are.
Yeah, brother. So, I mean, we can start. I grew up in Miami.
Nice.
Wonderful place to grow up in. Got in a lot of trouble there. you know. So as many of my buddies were getting ready to go off to grad school and become attorneys and doctors and stuff, I had no idea what I was going to do with myself.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be a cop like my brother.
Yeah.
Because that's what he always wanted to be. But sort of in that being lost as a young man, one thing I did know was I wanted to repay the country for the freedom it gave my family, because we came to the U.S. as immigrants from Cuba when I was 2.
Okay.
And so I really wanted to repay the country for having provided my family with the freedom.
Nice.
2 weeks after high school, I found myself on the yellow footprints of Parris Island, Marine Corps boot camp. And, amazing experience, got to learn quite a bit about myself. I thought this was the thing that was going to straighten me out. But that wasn't going to come for a couple years later, Adam. But no, brother, I learned a lot about myself and just a deep sense of gratitude to serve my country. And then actually when I got out, I couldn't make it onto any police departments. That's a whole other story. But I did become a fireman.
Oh, nice.
And that was really thanks to a buddy of mine who said, "Hey, man, cops get shot at, and nobody likes cops. Why do you want to go do that? Why don't you go be a hero like me and become a fireman?" I said, "Well, I like the EMT portion of it." So I ended up becoming a fireman, man, and later on a paramedic. And I did that for about 7 years, Adam, and just loved it, man. Loved serving my community. Loved, I think for a lot of us that go into service and go into the military, our heart is always in who can I be for others?
Yeah.
And then, another part of my story was that through most of my 20s and even my early 30s, I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression.
Okay.
And so on the back end, I had been coping with that in some not so great ways. Alcohol was a big way that I coped for many, many years. But I got to the point where the struggle with both alcohol and just other things in my life, I noticed they weren't getting me anywhere.
Yeah.
And that I was just suffering more. And so eventually I decided to, put my ideas about the stigmas of mental health aside, and I found a therapist. And over the course of a handful of years, she helped me sort of understand my mindset, understand my emotions on a different level. What I share for a lot of people to understand is, I grew up in this Hispanic household where, as men, you don't cry, you suck it up and you keep moving forward. 2 weeks after I leave my house, go into the Marine Corps, right? You can imagine their messaging around crying and expressing emotions, right?
Yeah.
And then as a fireman, right? Like my whole life had been this series of pushing down anything and everything.
Yeah.
And so, the therapist sort of pointed out, like, "Carlos, what did you think? Where did you think all that stuff was going to go?"
Yeah.
Right. I kind of chuckled along. I was like, "Well, yeah, it makes sense."
Back room somewhere in a box where I don't have to ever visit it again. Yeah.
Totally. I was the king of compartmentalizing, but then recognizing, oh, that stuff's got a place to, needs a place to go.
Right.
So, brother, after seeing how therapy for me helped me really just shift a lot in my life and to really heal, I said to myself, if I can go study this and do this for just one more human being, then I've served my purpose here on life.
So was that I was just going to ask, so what got you into doing what you do today? Yeah. So it was the life experiences. So did you transition then out from being a firefighter and EMT into the doctor that we know today?
Yeah. So it was a tough decision I had to sit with for about a year because I loved the work that I was doing, man. It was so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the department with guys whose fathers and grandfathers. There's a deep sort of level of commitment
Right.
to that
Yeah.
kind of work. But then there was this calling in my heart that's like, yeah, but this isn't the end of the road for you. There's something else out there. So I walked away, from the fire department to become a student for like another 6 years, which is wild. It took me a while to make that decision,
Wow.
but the calling was real and loud and clear.
So fast forward now into what you're doing, finding your purpose or your calling, as you call it, right?
Yeah.
And it was based off of experiences that you have gone through yourself, and it's created this calling to you do that job so you can help other people with what they're suffering through or their mental health, if you will.
Yeah, Adam, I sort of, I talk about this idea that if somebody comes to my office
Mm-hmm.
and says, Doc, I'm deeply depressed. I am hopeless, and I feel utterly helpless to get through the next day of my life. I can look across and say, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I know what you're feeling. And it probably feels a little bit like this. And you probably sometimes think this. And the look back over my way is like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
This isn't some shit you studied in school. You know what I'm going through. Right. And so, in a lot of ways, I feel that having gone through my own depression, my anxiety, at times PTSD, was, I can only see this looking back, was a gift, right? That traversing those dark places is what allows me now to sit in this place. And when somebody's sharing that with me, to be like, I'm here and there's a way out and I know it. And I'm going to help you navigate that to the best of my ability.
There's so many things that are just going through my mind. And
Yeah.
I think, a lot, the fact that we're both veterans, I think we see a lot of our brothers and sisters that go through this mental health, whether it's PTSD. I want to ask a question before we get into the PTSD stuff. Is like, what causes depression or anxiety? Is there something? And it's kind of a loaded question. I'm asking that on purpose.
Yeah.
But is there
No,
is there
that's okay,
something that triggers that depression or that anxiety with it? And I know it's different for anybody, but is there something? Is there a common ground somewhere with everyone?
I think there is, Adam. There are a subset of people. There's a percentage of people whose anxiety and depression might be, hereditary in some cases, in that, their brain may not produce or overproduce a certain level of chemical that, makes them, sort of predisposes them to anxiety and depression,
Okay.
right? That is real and true.
Really? Okay.
So some of those folks, they need medication and they
Yeah.
need, certain types of schizophrenia, right? Like these are conditions that, but what I have found in my work is that a, a majority or a higher percentage of especially depression and anxiety is rooted in two places. One, it's in our inability to express the emotions that we often feel. I talk about this idea of they get trapped. That energy gets trapped in us because it has nowhere to go.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'll use a story here in a minute to sort of highlight that for folks. And then the other place that it can come from is really, the environments that we grew up in. Right. So, if I had an overly anxious mother and let's just use that for an example. Who
Yeah.
Sort of anytime I tried to do anything like get down from there, you're going to fall, you're going to hurt yourself. That's dangerous. You're going to, right. You like that sometimes sort of the generational traumas from unhealed folks who we grew up around. Sometimes it can be situated there as well.
So
Right.
I've heard where a lot of times as older, now that, I'm a little more seasoned in life, in life, they say that sometimes as you get older, um, it wasn't necessarily your military experience that causes the anxiety or the depression or the PTSD, what have you. It stems much deeper than that into your childhood. And
Yeah.
I don't remember. I remember some parts of it, but I don't. I was hitting the head a lot too, so I don't.
Yeah.
I don't remember a
Yeah.
whole lot of it.
Let's talk about that,
You
man.
know.
I think, for some folks, part of where they're struggling, in terms of emotionally and psychologically, could absolutely be rooted in some traumatic experience that they had as adults,
Yeah.
right? But what a lot of the research is also showing is the coping skills that we learned or didn't learn early on in our development also play a role in how we experience those things later on.
Really.
So, I, you know, I'm going to tell a story here so that people understand the somewhat subtle and nuanced way in which we can develop these, sort of anxieties or depressions later on in life.
Okay.
Um, and just kind of keeping in mind that this doesn't speak to the traumatic things that we had,
Right.
right?
Right.
So here's a story about a little boy is going out to eat with his parents, right, Adam? They go out to eat every Friday. And on this particular Friday, the parents say, we're going to let you choose what you want to eat. Boy's like 6 or 7. So he gets all stoked, right? Like, finally, my parents aren't making decisions for me, right? So they get to the restaurant. Kid opens the menu, says this big, delicious, cheesy pizza and says, I want the pizza, right? To which, mom chimes in and is like, honey, are you sure? Why don't you get the burger? That's what you normally get, right? So the kid stops and thinks about it for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he sticks to his choice. He's like, no, 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 the pizza. And then mom, in very loving nature, and maybe, how some moms can tend to be overbearing. Honey, are you sure? Right? What if you don't like the pizza? You know the burger's the safe bet. So the child stops and thinks about it one more time, Adam. But he sticks to his guns.
Yeah.
And right in that very next moment, dad says, we're not getting the pizza. It's too big. You're not going to eat it all. It's going to be a waste of money. So the kid says, okay, I'll have the burger. And they go on about their dinner. But my question to you, Adam, is in that moment, what do you think that 7-year-old believes about his ability to make choices?
He can't. There's self-doubt. There's a slew of things going through my mind right now.
Right. Right. Maybe I don't make good choices. Maybe my choices are no good.
Well, you're not laying a solid, in my opinion, what I'm hearing, that the parents are not laying a solid foundation for the child.
Right. Now, this is an experience most of us could probably reflect on and be like, oh, yeah, I've had plenty of those.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things we know about parenting is that it's pretty consistent over time. Now, this wasn't coming from parents that were trying to harm that kid. They were just being parents, right? They were being parents probably in the way that they were taught to be parents. Right. But do you imagine, and what I meant by consistent as parents, meaning those parents, without knowing it, probably imparted that message around academics, extracurriculars, sports, piano, whatever else.
Right.
So do you imagine over time this kid starts to develop a second guessing, a doubting of his thoughts, feelings, and emotions?
Yeah.
Choices?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Over time, do you think that might impact his sense of self, sense of self-esteem?
Is null and void. It's not it's non-existent.
Right. Do you think with that level of self-esteem, this kid is impacted in sort of the friends he gravitates to?
I mean, yeah, you would think that it's probably not the best crowd to be around.
Right. The kinds of risks he's going to take or not take if that self-doubt is constantly in there.
Yeah.
Right. The kind of partner he chooses later on in life. Right. There's a ripple effect outward.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Adam. With all of my work, whether I'm coaching, counseling, doing group work, I want people to get curious about the environments that they grew up in. I grew up in a house that didn't have a lot of tolerance for mistakes. My father was, military background in Cuba, right? Just was dealing with his own sort of traumas as a kid, was a very angry man. So like if you spilled water at the dinner table, you caught a backhand.
Yeah.
There was a very clear message that only perfect behavior is allowed.
Right.
I happened to grow up with a mother that was just highly opinionated, was always going to tell you how you were doing it wrong or not well or not to her standard.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I also happened to have an older brother who was a golden child. So, right, like this kid never did anything
Yeah,
wrong.
you're looking at the life that you're supposed to do, and you're like you're trying to fill shoes that you can't.
Right. And so, again, nothing against any of these people, but if you look, through this lens at the first handful of years of my life developmentally, when I'm supposed to be developing, as children do, a strong sense of confidence, a strong sense of boundaries, a strong sense of self,
Yeah.
the message I'm getting is like, hey, kid, you're fucked up. You're
Yeah.
wrong. You're always doing it wrong,
Right.
which led to this message for a lot of us of I'm not enough. Right. And the only way I could ever be enough is if I'm meeting your perfect version of how you need me to be.
Yeah. I want to step in here real quick and say, folks, those of you that are listening, remember this is all stemming. We're talking about stuff that's happening in your childhood right now. Like we're getting to the base of stuff, and a lot of the times, at least in my experience, what I've heard from other people over the last 5 years or so, it's been a shift of like, oh, I don't understand why I have anxiety or why I'm depressed because I went through this in the military. And it's like, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
But from what you're telling me, that stems so much deeper than your adult life. You need to take it back several years. And
yeah, and so let's open it up from there, Adam. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if we had a parent that drank a lot,
mm-hmm.
if we had a parent that was maybe not around physically or even emotionally, I got a 2.5-year-old boy. I think most of us who didn't have a strong emotional father figure, which who the hell does, right? That's not the generation they came up with or what they were taught.
Yeah.
But I see with my son now how absolutely critical it is for him to have a father who can, one, not be angry all the time,
mm-hmm.
who can, get on his level, who can hear him out, who's not constantly dealing with my own inner criticism or frustrations about life so that I can meet him where he is. But what I'm saying is it's less about the traumas, because I think we think about traumas in our lives and we're like, we feel that we're broken because of them. No, it's about the critical events, right? Maybe we got bullied in high school. Maybe we lost a sibling somewhere along the way. Maybe, right? Like all of these critical events send ripples outward in our future to how we learn to experience ourselves, others, and the world in general.
Do you find yourself, I'm going to ask you along the lines here, but as a parent yourself, do you find yourself doing things much different than how they were done unto you at that age?
Absolutely. And I will say it's simply a product of the healing I've done on myself.
Yeah.
Healing my own relationship with my father, learning to be more patient, learning to let go of a lot of resentment, letting go of a lot of anger. The way I show up for my son is just more calm, more peaceful.
Yeah.
Yeah, brother, if I can just share for a moment a story, like this was probably about a year ago. My son was still learning how to walk and climb stairs, and he's got a couple toys in his hand, and he's trying to figure out the stairs with the toys, and he can't figure it out. And I'm just sitting behind him watching all of this, right? Yeah. And like a minute and a half later, he figures it out, and he gets up the stairs. And his mom, by the way, my wife, who's also a therapist, she says to me, "Thank you," because she saw how I was just wanting to get up the stairs. Like, right? Like if that was me growing up, it's like, come on, kid, we don't have time for your shit.
Yeah.
But the fact that I sat there and like breathed into the moment and gave this kid patience so that he can figure it out on his own, like there was this moment of like deep healing for me of like, oh, that's the work I've done on myself.
Yeah. Oh, man.
To not have been like my dad. Right. And I have 1,000 of those moments, with my son since he's been born.
There's a lot of you out there that are parents, and yeah, it's special. You realize you creating those memories with your kids,
Yeah.
I get emotional about it because I think about, you know, little bird, my son, who's getting ready to graduate college, and I was a single parent, and I had custody of him. So you think about, I remember when he was born. I remember saying to myself, "It's going to be different with him. I'm not going to be what was, and it's not that I had a horrible upbringing or anything like that. I know there's people who love him, but I was very angry at a young age, and through most of my 20s, but when my son was born, it was just like I remember saying it's going to be different, and I think back of, all the years of either trying to rush him or whatnot, and it was just like you'd start to rush him, and then you just sit back and you watch your child think and figure it out, and when they do, they have that aha moment. It's such a good feeling as a parent, I think, right?
Yeah, brother. And that's like, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for, even your vulnerability of feeling into that. Um, it's such a deep moment of healing for
Yeah,
you and for him,
yeah,
right? That moment that we can have this awareness of like, I want to do it differently than it was done to me,
yeah,
right? And like, what what gift you grant this boy for then when he becomes a father, if that's ever a thing.
yeah. And if you listen to this, that's not until you're 30 plus. Remember that.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah, yeah,
I want to, you've brought up healing
yeah,
several times. How true is it that you have to choose that you want to heal? Because I remember, and I'll share a story here in a
yeah.
second that I've never shared with anybody. But I feel like it's maybe perhaps time to share it. But I remember at 30 years old, yeah, my mother first husband adopted me, and he was not around much, over the road truck driver or whatnot. They got married when they were really, really young. It didn't work out. And it was a rough upbringing. And I remember not, when they divorced, I just stopped going to see him just because it just wasn't healthy. That's all I'll say. And I remember, and I was, I don't know, 13 at the time. I didn't see him from like 13 to I was 30. Didn't talk, didn't see him, nothing. When I was 30, I decided that I was going to make amends because I did not want to live the rest of my life angry. And that was one of the hardest decisions I've made. I had to make at that time in my life. Since then, mind you, I said earlier, I just turned 47. I've had a great relationship with that side of the family. And I'm glad that I was able to mend that fence. But there was a lot of things that had to be talked about and brought up, and understanding from both sides. So when you talk about healing,
Yeah.
how does one? Well, let me ask you this. I want to heal. Somebody comes to you and says, "Doc, I want to heal. I don't know how."
Yeah.
What do you tell them, or what do they do?
Great. You just took the first step. Awesome place to be.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes the decision to heal, Adam, is made for us,
Yeah.
in that the amount of suffering that we have endured or are enduring gets to a place where we just can't anymore. Whatever that means for you, I don't know.
It's almost
I
like
know.
it's almost to the point where it's like it's life is forcing you to heal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I was done drinking my problems away.
Yeah.
I was done ruining every fucking relationship that I got in. I was done holding on to just years of anger and resent
Yeah.
that was making me sick physically. And I was done feeling depressed. It's just I couldn't bear it anymore. I tried to get myself out on my own, and I just um, the truth for me, when that depression doesn't go away, those moments of hopelessness lead to suicidal thoughts.
Yeah. The
Right?
demons start to come out, and
Yeah, you go to the darkest places within your soul, right? So for me, the decision was made for me. The suffering made the decision for me. But where do we start? Right? Is I'm going to sit with that person and like, okay, what's going on in your life now? What do we need? Chances are we probably need some immediate steps, right? Some things. Do we need to shift our sleep a bit? Do we need to, some meditative practice? Do we need to change, what do we need to fix right now in the immediate so life feels bearable, where you can come up for air, and not feel like you're drowning.
right.
And then the second piece is, let's figure out how we got here, right? And that's part of my first session with anybody, is like, tell me about your upbringing, tell me about the house you grew up in, tell me what kind of relationship you had with your parents, tell me about school. And brother, usually within that first hour,
Yeah.
I gather enough information to be like, I know why you're having these particular struggles in life.
You're not looking at the outside. You're digging deep into somebody's foundation,
That's it.
and you're testing their foundation to get that information so you can
Right.
let them know
Right. Because
of things
there's
that they
two
probably haven't even thought of, right?
hadn't been even thought of. They haven't had to.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's my big thing as a clinician, and why I love commenting on shows like this, or speaking out in public, is to help people understand that by the time most of us are 9 or 10 years old, we've already been so conditioned and wired by our environments, most of the time in ways that we don't know. Right, going back to that kid that went out to eat with his parents.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to grant people and give people, is like, if we just take a little bit of time to explore, all of this is going to make sense.
Yeah.
The first thing that does, Adam, is, until we recognize what made us the way that we are, most of us are going around loathing ourselves or hating ourselves or beating ourselves up for being that way, because we think we're broken or something's wrong with us.
Do you find it that people have a hard time talking about it, or maybe are scared to revisit some of those things even though they want to heal?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to that, I say two things. One, we're going to go at a pace that feels comfortable for you. We don't have to race into anything. Three things, actually. The second one is, your psyche's doing a great job of keeping some of that stuff compartmentalized,
Yeah.
right? So we don't have to rush in there and open Pandora's box, right? But we'll get there. And the third thing is, and especially if it's a veteran or a first responder, or any of these types, be like, since when has scary shit been stopping you?
Ooh. God, that's a great
Right.
question.
Yeah.
Never really
Yeah.
looked at it that way when you think about it.
Right. Like you've worked your whole life to find courage and bravery out in the world,
Yeah.
and how to dominate and master that world. Let's bring that same courage and that same, grit to navigating now the inner world. And it calls on the same fears. It calls on the same uncertainties. It calls on the same, right? But now this one you're not used to. You don't know this one well. So we're going to walk together. We're going to walk together.
Speaking of walking together, one of the healing process, there's a lot of different things that you can do to heal. Right?
Yeah.
There's so many things out there nowadays. There's plant-based medicines. There's groups that you can sit in on. There's from the veteran side of things, there's tens of thousands of nonprofit organizations that from horsemen. I'll use my experience. I've done horsemanship, where working with horses, equine therapy, to hunting and fishing, or just being outdoors. Find what works for you. I've said that before. Doc, what's worked for you in some of your healing and transition, and what are some things that you recommend to people?
Yeah. Thanks, brother. So many things. It started with therapy.
Yeah.
But I'll say, even before the therapy, it started with the real first step was when I was 18 or 19, and I had just had a fallout with a girlfriend at the time. And over the most ridiculous of arguments over dinner, I punched a hole into the back of her forerunner and bloodied up my arm. And immediately, as that anger dissipated, Adam, it turned to tears because I was like, what is happening in my life? How have I lost control where I can't even manage my own emotions? Yeah. So the very next day, I went to Barnes and Noble and I bought a book on anger and men. And that book opened up my eyes to what might be going on in terms of depression and how for men, when we bottle up our emotions because no one modeled for us how to have emotions. And we were told, that we were weak for having them, but that when we bottle up all of our emotions, which also is absurd, right? If you're a human being, you're going to experience sadness, you're going to experience disappointment, you're going to experience hurt. But what I had learned was like, oh, I've been bottling all of this stuff up and it can lead to anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
That's then what led me to therapy. But since therapy, I could tell you that my healing has come through doing yoga, through deepening spirituality, through meditation. I just got back recently from a 10-day silent meditation retreat where I went inward, found some more demons that I didn't know were in there. Wow. Ayahuasca ceremony in 2022, some, psilocybin journeys as well. Somatic healing, which is a practice that we're seeing a lot now where you're sort of getting the not just some of these memories out of your mind, but out of our body. Sometimes when we experience trauma, it gets trapped in the body. So acupuncture, so a lot of different things, man. And being in nature, being in nature is a really grounding tool.
Yeah.
But I want to reinforce what you're saying, which is start where you are and start with what you think might work, right? There's millions of tools out there.
And I think the biggest thing, folks, is you have to want to. You got to say to yourself, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And some people will say, well, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Tying your shoe all the time, or make an excuse. You pick something. It could be anything. Nothing in life is easy, right? But it's doable.
Yeah,
because people do it every day.
Yeah, and so a couple things that you're saying there that I think are pivotal, Adam, is, the it's hard excuse has got to go, because alternatively, you not doing anything is making your life really hard.
Right.
So do you want to not keep doing something so that it stays hard? Or do you want to lean into the hard that's going to allow you to come out on the other side with tools, with healing, with a better version of yourself? Right. And the other thing is, sometimes we just need to know that it's possible. And this part I'll get emotional about, brother, but there was no reason for me to go on a 10-day silent meditation retreat to be alone with my thoughts. I've done a lot of healing.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can sort of stop the healing at this point and be like, hey, I'm good. But I keep doing it, brother. I keep working on myself because I need to be an example for others out there that it's fucking possible. And to share, right? To share my journey with others so that they can see a glimpse in my story. And maybe that's the thing that helps push them in that direction.
Doc, if somebody's listening to this right now, is there a way that they can reach out to you? Maybe they need to talk to you. How could someone that's listening right now that needs help, absolutely, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, brother, this is not an offering I put out there for most people, but you have my direct cell phone line, 954-830-6222. And I don't care what time of day it is. I don't care what day of the week it is. If you're at a place where you need something, or you just, send a text, hey, I need some guidance, whatever it needs to be, wherever you are, reach out. Also, if people are just kind of looking for therapy and maybe are in a place that's not too dark, I'm here in the Tampa area, and my practice is Tampa Counseling and Wellness. They can find me there. I have 4 or 5 amazing therapists, all of whom I've trained, who are providing some really good work, both here in the Tampa area and, around the country. But yeah, people have my number, and if they're in a place where they just need to chat, I'm always available.
Folks, we're going to have Doc's website in the show notes below. So if you're listening to this, it means you're already online. Just look at the show notes, click on that, open up another browser.
Yeah.
And get in touch. This is deep.
Yeah.
And not quite what I had anticipated today. And it was I don't get surprised very often, especially since it's my show.
Yeah.
But
one more thing, Adam, that I'll
please.
put out there,
Yeah.
if people resonate with this, but sometimes to do this level of work that you and I are talking about right now, there's one other component that's needed, and that's trust.
How do you do that? How do you trust? If you've had a hard time trusting people,
Yeah.
and then you're going through everything that you and I have talked about, how could one person sit there and be like, you know what, I trust that this is going to work?
Yeah. Well, it's not on them, it's on us, right? It's on me to develop the trust with you. So, for example, if people want to go on Instagram and follow Dr. Carlos A. Garcia, right? You'll get to know me. You'll get to know what I'm all about. The things that I talk about is what I bring into my practice. You can see a few videos. Hey, who is this guy and what is he about, right? And so it's on us sometimes to develop that trust, because we know it's not right. Like, sorry to slam the VA, but the VA has not done a good job of exemplifying trust with our veterans.
100%.
Most EAP programs for like firefighters and first responders, even within their organization, hasn't done a great job of fostering that level of trust, right? So I think as more of us do this healing work, right, like you having this podcast and the organization, that's how we build the trust.
Yeah.
So that people can see themselves in the work that we're doing, and maybe reach out that way. Right?
Folks, if you've been listening to the show and you followed me for at any point in the last decade, I trust Dr. Carlos. So if you trust me because you've been listening and you following, then every time that I put something out, I back it up 100%.
Appreciate
so
that.
So if you're out there, or you have a family member or your battle buddy that's going through something, get in touch with us so we can get you in touch with Dr. Carlos. Doc, I got one more question for you. The show's called The Decision Hour, and we make decisions every single day. Doc, I want you to name a time in your life where your feet are on the line and you have to make that decision. What is it, and what's the atmosphere like at that time?
Adam, I think as I think about the numerous times in my life where I've been in a transition, either personally, healing journey, career journey, it's that moment where you're met with uncertainty and fear and doubt, and everything in your mind and in your body is telling you, to not take that next step forward. And where you just go into that deep place within yourself to find the courage to be like, no, I need to take this next step forward. Not just for me, but for the people I serve. And so, to that decision, here I am again at 47, about to make another big transition in my life. I'm, letting go of my practice. I'm going to continue to see clients, but I feel that my service now is out in the community and out in the world, sharing some of these things that I've shared on your show today.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what that's going to look like. And it feels very uncertain, but I've learned to trust that there is a guiding system within me. You can call it your gut, your heart, your intuition, that no matter how fearful things get, no matter how hard they get, if I continue to trust that, it's going to put me on the right path and it's going to lead me right where I need to be for both myself and the world. So just keep leaning into your fear so that you can keep breaking it down and keep surrendering to those things that hold you back.
Thanks for everything you do, Doc.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you. Folks, we're going to have his social media stuff so you can follow Dr. Carlos on social media and reach out there as well. Please,
and Adam, thank you
reach out
for everything you're doing, brother. Just to know that folks have access to this and to you. Thank you for the work you've done. Your healing creates a space for the rest of us to continue to do our work, brother. So deeply grateful.
Thank you for saying. I've often said lately, and I say lately, and like the last 18 months, I've been on this kick where I look at, I've talked about purpose, and I've said that, at this point in my life, I'm blessed because I feel like my purpose is to help other people get to where they want to go in life. And, whether you believe in a higher being, God, what have you, for me, I believe in God, and I feel like God gave me a gift, and how selfish of it would be of me to not share that gift for those that need it. How selfish would I be? And then when my time comes, how am I supposed to explain that? I didn't use the gifts that were given to me because I was selfish, because I was too afraid to, or I was too afraid to, or whatnot. And because of that, I was not able to fulfill my purpose, which was to help other people. How selfish of me. And I don't want to be that guy. Doc, I appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Folks, before we let you go, make sure you go check out our parent network, Heroes Media Group. If you're a podcaster and author and you're looking for a home, we got one for you. Go reach out to heroesmediagroup.com. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.